And I think that's really important for us to think about it from that context, because when we think about the word affair, the natural assumption is, oh, are you cheating on your spouse with somebody else? Well, in this case, it's not somebody else, but it's the same concept, because you can have an affair and you could be cheating on your spouse with your job. If you find yourself working 50, 60, 70 hours a week and not spending the time with your spouse, your partner, that you rightfully could be and should be, you could be having an affair. You could be having an affair even when you're at home and you're concentrated on your favorite hobby. Maybe you're sitting there in the garage working on this project that had been taking days, weeks, maybe even months. Maybe you have a hobby that you'd rather go out and go fishing or go playing ball or go do something that takes you hours and days away from your family, and your wife is feeling neglected, unloved, and underappreciated. It doesn't necessarily have to be another person. It's really anything, in a sense, that has cheated your wife from the time, energy, and the love that she really deserves. And it's kind of like the verse, or not the verse, but the video that we just heard, that closing line. Your wife is like a rose. You treat her right, she'll bloom. If you don't, she might wilt. Before you're quick to place your blame on your wife and point out the negative things about her, do a quick check of yourself and make sure that you haven't robbed her of the time, love, and affection that she deserves, because she is your wife. And even more so than that, sometimes we might even be cheating on God, because we're robbing Him the time, glory, and love that He deserves. Second point that I want to talk about beyond love is the word listen. James chapter 1, verse 19 says, "My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." There is a difference between listening and hearing. And I would like to call up my wife, Karen, just to briefly illustrate this. This might be a little snapshot into the Lee household. So, I don't know, say it's about 7:30 right now, and I've got Root Sports turned on, and Justin Smoke is up to bat. Here we go.
Honey, guess what happened at work today?
What's that, honey?
One of my students came to class really late.
Uh-huh.
And he gave this crazy reason why he's late.
Yeah, great.
And he took off all his clothes and ran around the classroom.
Ooh, that's cool. That's cool. That's great.
And then he tried to kiss me.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks.
All right, I guess you're listening to me, huh?
Yes, I am. Yes.
This is just for fun, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Karen will be there at 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, performing nightly. Well, you know, the scary thing is that's not necessarily so much of a drama in terms of being fictitious. I mean, sometimes, and husbands, come on, you know what I'm saying, right? I mean, you might deny it up front, but whether it's the TV or maybe it's the internet or maybe you're fixated on something else, our wives are trying to communicate to us, and we're hearing, as in like I would hear cars pass on the freeway, you know, when I'm in my office, or I might hear the music in the background while we're in the kitchen or something like that. But am I truly listening? Her heart behind that was, there's something that I need to share with you. I need you to feel what I'm feeling right now. And you're my partner, and you're my best friend. Can you journey on this little snippet with me? And it's so easy for us to just tune out and think that we are listening. But really all we're doing is just treating her like the ambient noise of cars on a freeway. In that instance, she recognized that I wasn't listening. But sometimes your wife might truly be thinking that you are. And it'll come back to haunt you because it'll say, remember that conversation we had last week about da-da-da? And you're just kind of like, yeah, and you honestly don't remember because you weren't tuned in. I can't be the only guy in this place that is thinking this, And what's even worse is sometimes when you're having a conversation with your wife and she's talking to you and you're looking at her, but in your mind, you're like thinking about what you're going to say next, right? Or in your mind, you're thinking, okay, as soon as she's done talking, this is what I'm going to go do here. Da, da, da. I mean, you're just totally not even focused, even when you're having a conversation with her. Here's a test. And I think the question that you can always ask yourself, guys, is at the end of this conversation, is always kind of repeat this back to me. Such as, so what I think you're saying is, ... Or from what I understand, what you're telling me is, ... And that clears up a lot of that because that puts your perception out there of what you think she's saying. And if you're wrong, she can correct you or she can bring it back to something. But that kind of communication really helps in order to make sure that you guys are on the same page. It takes a little bit more work, but I guarantee you it leads to more of a happy home because you're not constantly arriving in this conflict. Proverbs 17:14. It's a funny little verse. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. So drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. I look at this verse and I go, this verse talks about checking yourself before you wreck yourself. And what I mean by that is, and what I think this verse is talking about, is the fact that you need to set aside times to discuss like your really important matters, okay? I understand sometimes there's like talk that just comes up through conversation. And sometimes you guys have a serious matter. It's like, oh, we got to talk about this bill that came up that hasn't been paid yet. Oh, we got to talk about this thing that happened with the kids at school, and it's really important. But sometimes when you're approaching a conversation, you're coming from a mind frame that is just like you're either upset or you're distracted. You might just be tired. And sometimes we just come up with these conversations like right before we go to bed, honestly. And sometimes you're just not in that mind frame to want to get into a deep conversation. And I respect that, and I understand that. And that's one of the things I've asked Karen. I said, I'm totally good, and actually I want you to tell me if there's something that I did wrong or, if there's just something that's not sitting right in your heart. But let's try to find a time that we can both talk about it and give it the attention that it's due. Not like when I'm lying in bed and I got the covers going and I'm like, yes, I'm about to hit REM stage, For me, like when I go to bed, I just want to sleep. And I know some people, they want to go to bed and they go, great, this is the time to talk. And Karen's not that bad about that. I mean, she's pretty good about that. But some of you guys might have marriages where one of the partners really just likes to start talking a lot when they go to bed and the other person, not such a big fan. Whatever the situation is, it might behoove you guys to be able to designate those times, especially for those important matters. Reach the dam, and then it's over. You're talking about some problems there. And remember, when you are talking, the way you approach the conversation, especially if it's an argument, husbands, it will really determine your wife's response. One of the things I've learned, and I'm still learning and still wrestle with, is when you get in an argument, the object of coming out of the argument is not to prove that you're right. And oftentimes we go into that. We're like, dude, we're in this argument, we're in this conflict, and my objective leaving this argument is for her to see that I won. I am right. I told you so. We want to rub that in. But the resolution of the argument shouldn't be resolved by you coming away the victor. The resolution comes about when you both walk away and progress is made, conflict is resolved, and you guys are both at peace with whatever's been settled. When you approach it with battle gear, guess what your wife's going to do? She's going to respond also with battle gear. So approach that with a gentle heart. Listen, be patient, and clothe yourself with a little humility. Colossians 3:19, husbands, love your wives, and do not be harsh with them. Sometimes we grow impatient with our wives, and I definitely will be the first to say that for myself. But instead of growing impatient with them, I think rather really try to take the time to get to know your wives. And yeah, even Uncle Bob, who's been married, tons of years, and tons of experience. And some of you guys have been married 20, 30 years. Almost everyone that's been married has been married more than me, because I've only been married a couple of years, right? But there's always things that you can learn and that you can know about your spouse. And you really should know some of the answers to these things, such as, when's the last time you asked your wife, so what kind of dreams do you have, honey? Or ask her, how do you feel about the losses in your life? Or, are you happy with your career? A lot of these things kind of come up, and we can be really flippant about it and treat them as just general questions. But if we take the time to really hear what's on our wives' hearts and what's making them tick, we might actually be able to unearth some of the stuff that often just kind of blows up at the surface because we haven't taken the time to really know how she's feeling. And I got to admit, even like with Karen, it's been a while, but we might talk about stuff like, what's up with our next stage, especially having just had Caden. We might talk about children. But I might go, wow, have I asked her, does she want to go back to work in 5, 10 years when the kids go to school? Does she want to stay at home for the rest of her life and be a stay-at-home mom and raise her children? These are questions that if you don't unearth these things in your spouse, they might come back to bite you. So besides loving and listening, I'll leave you with one third one, and it's called leading. Husbands were called to lead, and let's turn to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 23. It says, "For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior." At Cornerstone, we subscribe to the belief that as the head of the family, the husband is entrusted with a great deal of responsibility. And it's a tough thing. Some of us naturally would rather just retreat from that. Some of us would rather just take the passive approach and defer to our wives to make some of those decisions. But God has called us to not just assume that role, but to embrace that role, because that is our role in the marriage as the head of the household. I wanted to go ahead and take a few minutes and call up Brother Mike, who is going to join me here. And as you guys know, Mike is or has served as one of our elders at Cornerstone, and has recently stepped down from that. But I think that Mike has some really cool things and some very poignant things to share with us regarding leading his family. So I just want to ask you a few questions. That's okay, Mike? Put you on the spot. First of all, Mike, what does it mean to you then? If I say that the husband is the head of the family, what does that mean to you?